A billionaire CEO stepped into her own dealership, her name etched in brushed steel above the entrance, only to be quietly dismissed, not for her finances, but for something far more insidious, the color of her skin. What followed would unravel the very foundations of an industry. It began not with fury, but with a quiet decision. A moment of indignity became the spark that ignited a reckoning. Betrayal, resistance, and a relentless pursuit of justice. This is the true story of Naomi Caldwell, a woman who turned discrimination into revolution. In the heart of Manhattan, high above the clamor of traffic and ambition, Naomi Caldwell sat motionless in her corner office. The skyline stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, glittering with the weight of dreams. For others, it was a city of opportunity. For her, it had always been a proving ground. Every deal, every headline, every conference room stared down had been a test, a demand that she prove her right to be there. As the founder and CEO of Caldwell Motors, a luxury brand that rivaled the giants of Europe and Japan, Naomi had defied every stereotype. She hadn't inherited her power, she had carved it, one late night, one denied loan, one closed door at a time. As a black woman in an industry governed by legacy, lineage, and an unspoken code of exclusion, her rise had been nothing short of revolution. But revolutions never end. They evolve. On her desk, a letter lay open like a wound. Its message wasn't shouted. It was whispered, which somehow made it more dangerous. The words echoed through her mind, as if spoken by someone standing behind her. Dear Caldwell Motors, I recently visited your Beverly Hills showroom, eager to finally own the vehicle that, for me, symbolized success and craftsmanship. But instead of recognition or respect, I was met with coldness, suspicion, dismissed as if I didn't belong. A white customer, dressed like me, was shown the models I came to see. I wasn't even offered a test drive. I believed your brand was different. I believed you were different. Sincerely, David Williams. Her fingers lingered on the paper, trembling slightly. She had built Caldwell Motors not just as a car company, but as a statement. Luxury without prejudice, excellence without exclusion. This wasn't just a complaint, it was a mirror, and she hated what it reflected. She reached for the phone, each number pressed like a silent vow. When her assistant answered, his tone told her he already sensed the shift in atmosphere. I need you to book me a flight to Los Angeles, she said, her voice composed but heavy. Business or personal? Daniel asked carefully. Both, she replied. Then a pause. And keep it quiet. No press, no corporate trace, just me. There was only one place she could go for the answers she needed. Beverly Hills. The next morning, Naomi boarded her flight alone. She didn't bring an entourage, nor did she wear anything that marked her as a titan of industry. Just a crisp white blouse, fitted jeans, and clean sneakers. Her outfit was chosen with intention, neutral, ordinary, invisible. She wasn't there as the face of a global brand. She was there as a woman, an American woman, walking into a place that bore her name to see if it would treat her as an equal. The streets of Beverly Hills gleamed like a set from a film. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and wealth. As she stepped out of her rented SUV, her posture was composed, but her stomach churned. She knew what she was walking into, and still, a part of her hoped she was wrong. The showroom's glass facade shimmered under the California sun. Inside, the floor looked more like a museum than a dealership. Cars displayed like sculpture, their paint jobs flawless under curated lighting. The moment Naomi entered, the temperature dropped, figuratively and literally. The air was cool, laced with espresso and leather. Her presence was acknowledged but not welcomed. The receptionist greeted her with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Welcome to Caldwell Motors. How can I help you today?" Naomi returned the smile with practiced grace. "I'm here to look at the Bugatti Chiron Supersport." A flicker of hesitation, not in her voice but in her eyes. A pause, too brief to name but long enough to mean something. The woman nodded, excused herself, and walked away. Naomi stood still, her heart slow but steady. She wasn't surprised. She was waiting. From across the showroom, a man emerged. Tall, confident, crisp navy suit. His walk screamed authority. His name was Richard Langford, the Beverly Hills showroom manager. Naomi had read every word of his personnel file. He was good at his job, very good. But his approach had always been exclusionary, rooted in assumptions about who belonged and who didn't. He didn't recognize her. That was exactly what she wanted. "Meh," he said with a polished smile. "I understand you're interested in the Chiron." She nodded. "Yes, I'd like to take a closer look." His eyes scanned her, not her face, but her clothes, her shoes, her bag, and then in a tone that was calm but calculating, he asked, "Do you have an appointment?" She raised a brow, meeting his gaze head-on. There it was, the test, not of her credit, but of her worth. And the real story was just beginning. "I wasn't aware an appointment was necessary," Naomi said, her tone poised, not confrontational, an observation more than a challenge. Richard responded with a rehearsed smile, a corporate glaze over a colder truth. "For certain models, we schedule private viewings. These cars are highly exclusive." Naomi's expression remained composed, but inside a familiar weight pressed against her ribs. The weight of assumptions. She nodded, voice even. "I understand, but I'd still like to see it." Another hesitation, barely perceptible but telling. Richard leaned toward a nearby junior employee, young, maybe mid-20s, and whispered something quick and clipped. The young man turned toward Naomi, his eyes unsure, body language stiff. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, not meeting her gaze, "but at the moment, we don't have that model available for viewing." Naomi didn't flinch. Instead, she looked past him, her eyes finding the glass partition where the Bugatti Chiron Supersport sat on display under pristine white showroom lights. It gleamed, untouched and undeniable. "That's interesting," she said, calmly tilting her head, "because it looks like it's right there." Richard's smile held, but it was hollow now, like polished stone. "It's reserved for a client." "I assume that policy applies to all walk-ins?" Naomi asked, keeping her voice soft but loaded with meaning. "Of course," Richard replied smoothly, but he barely finished the sentence before the glass doors behind Naomi opened. A couple entered. An older white man in a tailored navy suit, and a woman sparkling with diamonds and the comfort of lifelong privilege. The energy shifted. "Mr. and Mrs. Calloway, welcome," another salesperson beamed, rushing forward. They were handed champagne within seconds, ushered straight to the Bugatti Naomi had been denied. Naomi turned back to Richard, her eyes like steel beneath the calm. "That seems inconsistent." "They're longtime clients," he said, still smiling. "We already have their financials. It saves time. I'm sure you understand." But he wasn't just telling her she wasn't a priority. He was declaring she didn't qualify, not because of money, but because she didn't fit the mold, because in his mind, she was an anomaly, not a client. Naomi could have ended it right there. She could have shattered his smugness with a single sentence, "I own this brand," but that would defeat the point. She wasn't here to command respect through power. She was here to test whether the company lived up to the values she had poured into it, without her title to insulate her. Without a word, Naomi stepped aside and sat quietly in one of the lounge chairs that circled the showroom. She didn't storm out, she didn't raise her voice, she just watched. For the next hour, she observed every interaction, every micro-expression, every sales approach like a silent investigator collecting evidence in real time. and a pattern emerged. White customers, regardless of their attire, were greeted immediately, often with smiles, offers of drinks, brochures, and full walkthroughs. Men in gym clothes, women in flip-flops, they were seen, they were valued. Customers of color, on the other hand, were often overlooked or subtly redirected. A black man in an Armani suit was politely shown to the lower-end models, as if his style didn't match his spending power. It was all done under the pretense of professionalism, but Naomi saw through it. It wasn't about fit. It was about filters. Filters built into the culture of the place she had created. Her jaw tightened. This wasn't about one employee or one manager. This was systemic. It was intentional. And worse, it had been allowed to exist under her name. She checked her watch. An hour had passed. Not once had anyone come back to offer her help. Naomi stood, her movement fluid, controlled. She didn't make eye contact with Richard on her way out. She didn't need to. Stepping into the golden California sunlight, the warmth clashed with the chill inside her chest. But she wasn't angry. Not yet. She was clear. This wasn't a one-off incident. This was a machine. And machines could be dismantled. Across the street, Naomi took a seat at a cafe with a clear view of the dealership. A porcelain cup of black coffee sat untouched before her, the bitterness curling into the air. She stirred it slowly, watching the showroom like a chess player scanning the board. Her plan had never been to cause a scene. She had come to observe. And now, she was witnessing a system unfold before her like a well-rehearsed script. Inside, the choreography continued. Salespeople moved like performers on a stage, attentive, charming, efficient, with the right audience. A man in a navy blazer entered, and a salesperson nearly sprinted to greet him. Polished shoes, confident stride, and whiteness. His credentials were visible before he spoke a word. Then a young black man walked in, just as well-dressed, exuding composure. He approached a car quietly. Seconds passed. No one moved. When someone finally approached, it was with folded arms, a cool tone. The message was clear. "We're not sure you belong here." Naomi felt her fingers press against the ceramic cup a little harder. Then came the moment she didn't expect. A woman, young, perhaps 25, stepped forward near the reception desk. Her auburn hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail, her blazer neat, tablet in hand. But what caught Naomi's attention wasn't her appearance. It was her hesitation. Maria Torres. Naomi had noticed her earlier. She had seen the flicker of discomfort when Richard whispered orders. The way Maria's gaze lingered on each customer, not judging, but questioning. There was something in her body language, a subtle stiffness, as if she was at war with what she was expected to do. Naomi leaned forward slightly, heart stirred by a different kind of recognition. Among the silent complicity of her showroom there was a spark of conscience. Someone who saw the same patterns she did, and who wasn't okay with them. The revolution, Naomi realized, wouldn't begin with outrage. It would begin with a whisper. A fracture in the system. And Maria Torres might just be the crack the light could pass through. Then came the moment that erased every shred of doubt Naomi had tried to suppress. A middle-aged black woman entered the showroom with a soft, hopeful smile, an expression worn by those who still believed in fairness, or at least wanted to. Naomi observed from across the street, her eyes narrowing as the woman approached the front desk and began speaking with Maria, gesturing gently toward one of the display vehicles. Maria nodded, clearly prepared to assist. It was a simple moment, one that should have passed without incident, but Naomi noticed how Maria's posture stiffened as Richard appeared. With a single tilt of his head and not a word spoken, he redirected her elsewhere. Maria hesitated, torn by something invisible yet deeply present. The customer stood alone, confused, then quietly turned and walked out, unhelped, unacknowledged. Her presence evaporated as if she had never mattered. That hesitation, Maria's flicker of resistance, was all Naomi needed to see. She left a $20 bill under her untouched coffee, slung her bag over her shoulder, and crossed the street with silent purpose. Inside, the showroom was still the same polished theater it had been earlier. Sleek, performative, false. This time, Naomi didn't acknowledge Richard. He was part of the scenery now, an artifact of everything wrong with the system. She made her way directly to Maria. The young woman looked up, startled. Her grip on the tablet in her hands tightened instinctively. "Hi," Naomi said softly, but with unshakable calm. "I was hoping you could help me. I'd like to take a closer look at one of the vehicles." Maria hesitated again. There it was, that war inside her. Duty versus conscience. Obedience versus truth. She started, then glanced toward Richard, who was deep in conversation across the room. "Which model?" Naomi allowed the briefest smile to touch her lips. Maria hadn't dismissed her. Not like the others. "The Bugatti Chiron Super Sport," she replied. Maria's breath caught slightly, her knuckles whitening around the tablet. "That's," she began. "It's right there," Naomi finished for her, nodding toward the pristine display under shimmering lights. Maria looked down. "That particular model is reserved," she mumbled, but her tone had lost conviction. Naomi's voice softened. "You don't have to do this." Maria's head snapped up. "Do what?" "Pretend we both don't know why I can't see that car. Pretend the car being reserved has anything to do with policy." A silence followed, tense and charged. Maria opened her mouth, then closed it again, struggling with the weight of what she wanted to say. Naomi could see her building towards something honest, but the moment was shattered. "Maria." Richard's voice sliced through the space like a blade. Both women turned. He approached with the confidence of someone who believed the world existed to serve him. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his tone carefully controlled. Maria stood frozen. "No, sir." "Good," he said, shifting his attention to Naomi. His smile was mechanical. "As I mentioned, we don't have anything available that would be a good fit for you." Naomi didn't flinch. She let the insults settle into the space between them, unchallenged but fully absorbed. Maria's jaw clenched. Naomi noticed the slightest shake in her hands. Richard gestured for her to follow. She turned, but her grip on the tablet was tighter now, her steps uneven. That was defiance, small but real. Naomi said nothing more. As she turned to leave, she reached into her bag and placed a business card on the edge of the desk, careful and deliberate. Maria saw it. She didn't say anything, but Naomi made sure she read the name before walking away. Naomi Caldwell. "You ever want to talk? Call me." Back outside, the sunlight felt heavier. Naomi didn't feel triumphant. She felt resolute. The real fight was just beginning. Maria sat behind the wheel of her compact sedan, parked in the dim employee lot, engine off. She hadn't moved in 10 minutes. In her palm was Naomi's business card, its edges bent from how tightly she'd been holding it. No title, no logo, just a name and a number. But Maria knew who she was. She exhaled hard, the weight of her entire shift crashing down all at once. But it wasn't the hours or the customers. It was the shame, the ache of complicity. She stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her eyes looked older than they should. She had spent the last 2 years justifying every order, every reroute, every silence with the same excuse. "I'm just doing my job." But something cracked today. Watching Richard dismiss Naomi with such calculated cruelty, seeing her pushed aside in a showroom bearing her own name. Maria couldn't unsee it. Keeping quiet hadn't made her feel safe. It had only made her feel small. Before she could talk herself out of it, she pulled out her phone and dialed the number. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, warm, steady, and completely unsurprised. "This is Naomi." Maria swallowed hard. "It's Maria, from the showroom." A pause. "I'm glad you called," Naomi said, her tone soft. "I don't know why I did," Maria whispered. "I think you do," Naomi replied gently. "Do you want to meet?" Maria glanced around, as if afraid someone might hear her even from within her own car. "Yeah, but somewhere private. There's a cafe on West 3rd, quiet place. Do you know it?" "Yeah, I'll be there in 20. Naomi arrived early, choosing a quiet table in the back. The lighting was dim, and the hiss of the espresso machine offered just enough cover for privacy. She stirred her tea absent-mindedly, though she had no intention of drinking it. When Maria entered, Naomi saw it immediately, the way her shoulders hunched, the way her eyes darted across the room. She looked like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, uncertain if the ground beneath her would hold. Naomi gave her a small nod. Maria walked over slowly, her hands resting on the back of the chair before she sat, as if needing one last second to decide whether to run. "I shouldn't be here," Maria said. Naomi didn't flinch. "But you are." Maria let out a breath and dropped into the chair across from her. Silence followed, but not awkward. Intentional. Naomi let her sit in it, knowing she would speak when she was ready. And she did. "You don't understand how bad it is," Maria muttered. "It's not just the customers we ignore, it's how we're told to do business." Naomi didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on Maria's. "Tell me." Maria glanced around, then leaned in. "There are rules, unofficial ones. They're not written down, but they are enforced. We're told to assess a customer within the first 60 seconds. Naomi's tone stayed even. "You mean profiling?" Maria hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." Race, style, tone of voice, even posture. Richard doesn't say it outright, but he doesn't have to. And if a customer doesn't fit the profile, we're told not to waste time, especially if they're black and not famous. If they're not someone big, we're expected to politely redirect them. If we don't, we get warned. Publicly. Naomi's stomach turned, but she stayed composed. "Have you ever pushed back?" Maria laughed bitterly. "What do you think? I tried once. Helped a guy, black, dressed sharp, asked good questions. Richard pulled me aside. Said I was being naive. I got a warning in front of everyone. Said I was hurting team performance." Naomi studied her carefully. The courage it took to say this out loud wasn't small. It came from something deeper, something aching to change. And now, the question lingered between them. "Wald, when are you here?" Maria hesitated, her voice trembling with something between guilt and clarity. "Because I saw what happened today, and because I don't know. I guess I'm just tired. Tired of being a part of it." She rubbed her temples, frustration etched into every movement. "I hate that I didn't stand up for you." Naomi's response was immediate and firm, yet compassionate. "That's not why I'm here, Maria. I'm not looking for an apology." Maria lifted her gaze. Then, "What do you need?" Naomi leaned forward, her eyes steady, unwavering. "I need to know if you'd be willing to stand by what you just told me." Maria's face shifted, fear and hesitation battling with conviction. "You mean go public?" "Not yet," Naomi reassured her. But if I move forward with this, I need someone inside who can confirm what's really happening." Maria looked away. Her fingers knotted in her lap. "If I do that, I lose everything." "I won't ask you to do anything you're not ready for," Naomi said. "But if you ever decide you want to be part of the change, I'll be here." Silence stretched between them. Maria stared at her hands, at the floor, then finally exhaled a slow breath. "I don't know if I'm that brave." Naomi gave a soft, knowing smile. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just admit the truth." Maria didn't reply, but she didn't leave either. She stayed in her chair, unmoving, her silence becoming its own kind of answer. Naomi took it as a beginning. As she stepped back into the pulsing Los Angeles night, the city lights flashing like silent signals around her, she felt something shift deep in her chest. This wasn't just about a personal insult. This wasn't just about Richard Langford. It was about a machine, a lie masquerading as tradition. And Naomi was done pretending it could fix itself. Back in her hotel room, Naomi sat at the small desk, her phone beside her. The conversation with Maria played again and again in her mind. None of it surprised her, but that didn't make it less maddening. She had wanted to believe the problem was isolated, a few bad actors, a moment of unconscious bias. But what Maria described was not isolated. It was a structure. She leaned back, staring out over the sprawl of Los Angeles. The lights sparkled like false promises. She had fought so hard to build a brand that meant more than wealth, a brand built on access, merit, and fairness. And now it was being used as a front for exclusion. Richard Langford wasn't an outlier. He was the architect. She couldn't just confront him. He would gaslight, deny, wrap himself in plausible deniability. She needed something more than testimony. She needed proof. Naomi picked up her phone. "Daniel," her assistant answered instantly. "You found something?" "Oh," she murmured, her voice quiet with fury. "I've found plenty, and now we're going to catch them in the act." The next morning, Naomi dressed exactly as she had before. Simple jeans, a clean pressed button-down, sneakers. Nothing about her look suggested wealth or power. She carried the same modest crossbody bag, no designer label in sight. She walked back into the Caldwell Motors showroom like any other potential customer. Richard was there, speaking with another client. He didn't notice her. That was good. This time, she didn't go to him. Instead, she approached a different salesperson, a young woman arranging brochures near a luxury sedan. "Excuse me," Naomi said, polite and measured. "I'd like to take a closer look at the Bugatti Chiron Super Sport." The woman barely glanced at her before offering a well-rehearsed smile. "Unfortunately, that model isn't available for viewing right now." Naomi tilted her head. "Are you sure? I saw it on display yesterday." "I'm sorry, ma'am. It's currently unavailable." No hesitation, no confusion, just a clean, clinical denial. Naomi nodded slowly, filing the moment away. "Thank you," she said, and walked out. Now it was time for phase 2. Outside, Naomi called Daniel. "Time to run the test." "I'm already on it," he replied. He just pulled up. 20 minutes later, a sharply dressed man in his mid-40s exited a sleek black rental car. His blazer was navy, his shoes Italian leather. His name was Michael Reeves, an old friend of Daniel's. He was white, well-spoken, and possessed the same wealth and credit score as Naomi. The only difference was the skin he wore. Naomi watched from a discreet distance as Michael walked through the showroom doors. The transformation was immediate. A salesperson greeted him within seconds, smiling, open, eager. Champagne was offered, brochures placed into his hands. He was led to a private lounge. Then came the moment of truth. Michael asked to see the Bugatti Chiron Supersport. No one hesitated, no one denied. Richard Langford himself emerged from his office, beaming with charm. "Welcome, sir. I understand you're interested in the Chiron Supersport." "I am," Michael replied smoothly. "I'd love to take a look." "Absolutely," Richard said. "Let me give you a personal tour." And just like that, he led Michael toward the car that just moments ago Naomi had been told was unavailable. Naomi's chest tightened. She felt vindicated and enraged. Her phone buzzed. "Daniel, you getting all this?" "Every second," Naomi replied. Daniel, stationed nearby with hidden equipment, recorded everything. The warm greeting, the instant access, the personal tour, every polished word, every lie, captured on film. 20 minutes later, Michael exited, giving Naomi a subtle nod. "They couldn't have been more accommodating," he muttered. Naomi pulled up the footage. She watched as Richard grinned and extended his hand, shaking Michael's with enthusiasm, the same hand that had waved her off. Her smile was quiet, sharp. The game was over. It was time to make her move. That night, Naomi sat in her hotel room. The video paused midstream, Richard's face frozen in his mask of professionalism. She had watched the footage a dozen times. Every frame was ammunition. But she didn't want to go nuclear, not yet. She needed to see how they reacted under pressure. She called Daniel. "Let's start with a warning shot." The next morning, an email landed in Caldwell Motors' corporate inbox. It came from a journalist at an independent business publication. At least, that's how it looked. In reality, the identity was a crafted alias from one of Daniel's trusted media contacts. The subject line: "Inquiry regarding alleged discriminatory practices, Beverly Hills showroom." The body was clean, professional, ominous. "Dear Caldwell Motors PR team, we've received multiple reports from sources alleging racially discriminatory customer service practices at your Beverly Hills showroom. These include claims that access to certain vehicles is restricted based on the perceived race or appearance of customers. We've also been informed that there may be documented evidence supporting these claims. Before publishing our report, we're offering your team the opportunity to respond. Please let us know if a spokesperson is available for comment." It was unsigned, but it was loud. At precisely 11:32 a.m., Richard Langford's phone rang. "Langford speaking," he answered. His regional director's voice exploded in his ear. "Richard, what the hell is going on over there?" Richard straightened. "Excuse me? We just got an email from a journalist about racial discrimination at your showroom. If this turns into a PR nightmare." Richard cut in quickly. "It's nonsense. Just some reporter trying to stir the pot." "Figure it out," the voice growled. "Because if corporate gets involved, you're done." Richard stood frozen, rage boiling beneath his skin. Someone had talked. His eyes scanned the floor, landing on one person. "Maria Torres. Maria, in my office, now." She stood slowly, her body stiff with dread. She walked through the showroom, past colleagues whose eyes darted away. Inside his glass-walled office, the door shut with a snap. Richard leaned against his desk, arms folded, his voice low and cutting. "Tell me something, Maria. Have you been talking to anyone you shouldn't?" Maria's hands curled into fists at her sides. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. But inside her, something else was starting to rise. A quiet, powerful resolve. "Don't play dumb with me," Richard snapped, his voice cracking with fury. "There's a journalist sniffing around our policies. Someone in this showroom opened their mouth." Maria kept her voice level, though her heart thundered in her chest. "I haven't spoken to anyone," she said firmly. "I just do my job. Same as everyone else." Richard narrowed his gaze, eyes slicing into her with unspoken suspicion. "You've always been a little soft about this," he muttered. "I've seen it. The hesitation, the way you flinch when you're supposed to follow protocol. You care too much about things that aren't your concern." Maria swallowed hard, her jaw clenched. He exhaled, shaking his head as if disappointed in her for a test she hadn't even agreed to take. "Let me make one thing perfectly clear. If I find out someone in this building is stirring up trouble, there will be consequences. Understand?" Maria nodded once, suppressing the tremble rising through her limbs. Showing fear would only confirm his suspicions. Richard watched her for a beat longer, then waved his hand as if shooing a child. "Get back to work." As she walked out of his office, each step heavier than the last, Maria's pulse pounded in her ears. Her face remained calm, but her mind was already racing. She had to warn Naomi, but now she knew every move would be watched. In her hotel's private lounge, Naomi sat with her laptop open and phone in hand, scanning emails with a calm that bordered on eerie. She had predicted this next move. Richard, rattled and cornered, was beginning to cannibalize his own team. An anonymous message from inside the showroom confirmed it. Richard was interrogating staff. He was panicking. Naomi's eyes narrowed. Good. It was time to escalate. She composed an email, attaching the recorded footage of Richard warmly offering the Bugatti Chiron Supersport to Michael, proof of racial bias. She addressed it directly to Jonathan Fields, a board member she knew well enough to count on discretion, but not cowardice. Subject: urgent, customer treatment issue at Beverly Hills showroom. Jonathan, I thought you should see this. This is how customers are being treated at one of our highest profile locations. If this reaches the public, we're not looking at a PR hit. We're staring down a full-blown company-wide scandal. We need to discuss before this becomes front-page news. She hit send. Then she waited. Didn't take 24 hours. Richard was reviewing sales reports when his office line rang. The voice on the other end was corporate clipped, sharp, unforgiving. "We have a problem." Richard stiffened. "What kind of problem?" "A board member received a report, a video. Richard, you know what I'm talking about." Richard's skin went cold. "This is blown out of proportion," he began, chuckling nervously. "We get plenty of time wasters." "Cut the crap," the voice barked. "We're launching an internal review, effective immediately. Get ahead of this, fast, or you're the first to go." The line went dead. Richard sat, frozen, his grip tightening on the edge of his desk. He thought he had built an untouchable empire. Now it was collapsing around him. 15 minutes later, every department head was summoned to the conference room. The air inside was suffocating. Richard stood at the head of the glass table, fury masked by composure. "We have a leak," he said. "Someone here is feeding information to outsiders." The managers looked at one another, silent and tight-lipped. Richard continued, "Effective immediately, I want all internal emails about customer profiling, screening, or sales prioritization deleted. If I find a single trace of something that could be used against us," he let the threat hang. "And from now on, no one talks. Not outside this building, not at lunch, not in passing, not even in a goddamn joke." The sales manager cleared his throat nervously. Do we know how much they have?" "We know they have enough," Richard snapped. "If we don't handle this now, it'll take all of us down." His eyes swept the room. "So I'll ask again. Who's been talking?" Silence. "Fine," Richard growled. "I'll find them myself." Back at her desk, Maria's hands trembled as she opened her inbox. She quickly purged anything that could be considered suspicious, but she knew it was too late. The wheels were already turning. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her throat tightened as she answered. "Maria, Naomi's voice came through, calm but urgent. "Richard's looking for someone to blame." "I know," Maria whispered. "He's convinced there's a leak." "I figured this would happen," Naomi said. "Has he talked to you?" "Not yet," Maria replied, "but I know it's coming." Naomi's tone turned softer. "Stay calm. If he questions you, deny everything. Do not give him a reason to focus on you." Maria closed her eyes, taking slow, shallow breaths. "I'm scared." "I know," Naomi said, voice quiet now. "But I won't let anything happen to you." Maria nodded silently. Then, her heart seized. A shadow passed in front of the lounge door. Richard, watching her. "I have to go," Maria whispered, ending the call. "Maria," Richard said as he stepped into the lounge, closing the door behind him. His voice was smooth, but his eyes were cold steel. "Mr. Langford?" she replied, forcing a smile. He motioned to the chairs. "Sit." She obeyed, folding her hands tightly in her lap to hide the shake. "You know why I'm here?" "No, sir," she said, steady as she could manage. "That's interesting," he said, eyes glinting. "Because I have reason to believe someone on my team has been talking to people they shouldn't." Maria didn't flinch. "I wouldn't know anything about that." Richard leaned forward. "I've always thought you were different. You ask questions, you hesitate, you care." She didn't break eye contact. "I just do my job. That's what I like about you." He let the compliment hang in the air, then slowly, "So I'll ask again. Have you spoken to anyone?" Maria gripped the hem of her blazer under the table. "No." He watched her for a long, long moment, then stood. "Good," he said, "because if I find out someone's been running their mouth, it won't end well for them." Then he walked out. Maria exhaled shakily the second the door closed. Her composure cracked, but only for a moment. Back at her hotel, Naomi stared out the window, fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the table. Maria's voice echoed in her mind. Richard was unraveling. He wasn't strategizing. He was reacting. Sprit. That meant the pressure was real. But Naomi also understood something more dangerous now. Richard wasn't acting alone. She opened her laptop and began digging deeper. Within the hour, she found it. A quiet financial trail, a history of communications, a connection, one that led straight to a senior executive at Caldwell's corporate office. Someone who had shielded Richard, someone who had enabled him. Naomi didn't have the full story yet, but she had enough. This wasn't just one corrupt manager. It was a rot running through the bones of the company she had built. And now, she was going to burn it out. On the showroom floor, Maria barely had time to breathe before she heard it. "Maria." Richard's voice, sharp, commanding. "In my office, now." Maria's heart slammed against her ribs, but her face remained composed. She gently set down the tablet she had been holding, the room spinning just slightly around her. She had expected this. She had known it was coming, but that didn't make the moment any easier. As she made the long walk to Richard's office, the gleaming glass walls of the showroom felt like prison bars. Everyone could see her, but no one could save her. Each step echoed like a countdown. When she stepped inside, Richard closed the door with a soft click. There was no smirk on his face now, just a dangerous stillness. "Have a seat," he said, motioning toward the chair across from his desk. Maria hesitated for a split second before lowering herself into the leather seat. She folded her hands tightly in her lap, holding herself still, even though her instincts screamed for her to flee. Richard leaned back, fingers steepled. "Maria, I've always thought you were one of the smart ones." She remained silent. "That's why I wanted to speak to you privately, just the two of us." His tone was laced with false warmth, predator masked as mentor. "There's been a lot of noise lately," Misunderstandings? Maria stayed quiet, her breath shallow. He shook his head slowly. I think we both know someone in this showroom has been running their mouth, and I don't want to believe that person is you. Maria's stomach twisted. The threat was velvet-lined, but the blade was real. This room has a reputation. We all do. And I'd hate to see you throw away everything you've worked for, just because someone convinced you they were on your side. He was giving her a way out. All she had to do was turn on Naomi. But Maria had come too far to turn back now. I don't know what you mean, she said, tilting her head ever so slightly, feigning confusion. Richard gave her a long look, then exhaled like a disappointed father. Maria, he said, more softly now, I can protect you, but I need to know who's stirring this up. You tell me, and I'll make sure you keep your job. No more questions, no more heat. Just a quiet return to normal. Beneath the desk, Maria's fists clenched until her knuckles ached. I appreciate that, sir, she said carefully, but I really don't know anything. The sympathy vanished from his face. In an instant, the mask dropped. That's disappointing, he said coldly. He sat forward, his tone turning from subtle to sinister. You think you can fight this system, Maria? She said nothing. You're just an employee, replaceable. If I find out you're involved, you won't just lose this job. You'll never work in this industry again. Luxury brands talk, Maria. You'll be blacklisted. Do you understand me? The weight of his words crashed over her like a tidal wave, but Maria didn't break. If there's anything you want to say, he added, voice quieter but edged with venom, now would be the time. Maria met his gaze squarely. I don't have anything to say. He studied her for a moment, eyes hard, then nodded once. Fine, you can go. She stood, her legs trembling beneath her, and turned toward the door. But if I find out you lied to me, he called after her, letting the threat hang like smoke. Maria didn't look back. She didn't realize how fast she was walking until she reached the break room. Her hands were shaking as she grabbed her phone and dialed Naomi. The call connected immediately. Maria. He knows, Maria whispered, backing into the wall. Or at least, he's pretty sure. He's trying to scare me into saying something. What did he say? Naomi's voice was calm, but Maria could feel her mind already shifting into strategy. He told me if I talked, I'll never work again. A long pause. Are you okay? Maria laughed bitterly. Not really. Devon kept his hand on her. Naomi exhaled. He's bluffing. If he had proof, he wouldn't be asking questions. He's desperate. That means we're winning. Maria wiped her forehead. So what do we do? Now? Naomi's voice sharpened. Now we turn up the heat. Naomi sat at her hotel desk, the night cityscape glittering behind her. The pressure in her chest wasn't fear anymore. It was fuel. She opened her laptop, pulled up her contact list, and clicked on a name. A journalist who didn't just break stories. She lit fires. He typed, I have something for you. Proof. Under conditions. This isn't just about one man. It's bigger. Then she hit send. Next, she picked up the phone and called one of her oldest allies inside Caldwell Motors, a trusted executive, one with enough power to call a board meeting. We need to talk, Naomi said the moment they picked up. Before this turns into a crisis you can't contain. Back in Beverly Hills, Richard paced his office like a caged animal. Who sent the damn video? He barked into the phone. We don't know yet, his corporate ally replied, but the board's in full panic mode, and Naomi Caldwell just requested a meeting. Richard stopped mid-step. She what? She's coming after you, the voice said darkly, and this time she's not alone. For the first time, Richard felt it. Not control, not anger. Fear. The next day, Naomi stepped into the sleek executive conference room on the top floor of Caldwell Motors' Manhattan headquarters. The skyline behind her was dazzling, but she didn't look at it. She was here for war. She had sent the meeting request the night before. Every senior executive, every board member, no context, no subject line, just one phrase. Urgent, immediate attendance required. The room buzzed with murmurs. Richard sat across the long polished table, his posture perfect, but Naomi saw the tightness in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped an uneven rhythm. He was waiting for the hammer to fall. He just didn't know how hard. Naomi adjusted the microphone. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," she said, voice steady. "I've called this meeting because Caldwell Motors has a problem." She let the silence stretch, her eyes scanning the room. "We've built our brand on excellence, not just in performance, but in service, in equity, in who we welcome through our doors. But that promise has been broken." She nodded to the IT specialist. "Play the footage." The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. First, Naomi entering the showroom, asking to see the Bugatti, being turned away. Then, Michael Reeves, white, welcomed, offered champagne, shown the same car with enthusiasm and ease. Naomi didn't react. She didn't need to. The room was dead silent. When the video ended, she leaned back. "Well," Richard cleared his throat. "This is a misunderstanding." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Is it? Our showroom has policies," Richard said. "We prioritize based on history, engagement, and yes, appearance. But it's about efficiency, not exclusion." Naomi's voice was sharper now. "So you're saying it's company policy to turn people away if they don't look the part?" "That's not what I said," Richard replied quickly. "That's exactly what you said," Naomi countered. "Would you have treated me the same if I had walked in wearing a Chanel suit and diamond earrings?" He paused. It was only a second, but it was enough. Naomi turned to the board. "This isn't about one manager. This is systemic. If we allow this to continue, we won't just be facing internal backlash. We'll be dealing with lawsuits, protests, national headlines." Jonathan Fields, a longtime board member, cleared his throat. "Naomi, let's not be naive. Luxury brands cater to a specific clientele. Our customers expect exclusivity." Naomi looked him dead in the eye. "Are you suggesting exclusivity and discrimination are the same thing?" "I'm saying there's discretion involved," Jonathan replied weakly. Naomi turned back to Richard. "Let me ask you something. If a wealthy black celebrity had walked into your showroom, would they have been treated the same way I was?" Richard gave a short laugh. "Of course not, because—" He stopped himself. Naomi leaned forward. "Because they're famous," she finished. Richard went silent. "You just admitted it," Naomi said, her voice like iron. "The line isn't wealth, it's recognition. It's familiarity, it's comfort, and it's racism." She let the silence hang, and then she said, "I won't let this brand stand for that, not on my watch. When your team evaluates customers based on status instead of financial capability," Naomi said, voice calm but razor-edged, "you're not selling exclusivity. You're selling an illusion that only certain types of people deserve luxury." The room tensed. Claire Danvers, young and sharp from PR, shifted in her seat. "If this gets out," she said, voice tight, "we'll be accused of racial bias." Naomi turned to her, meeting her gaze without flinching. "There's no if, Claire. It's already out. The only question is whether we face it with integrity or wait for the media to do it for us." The silence that followed was suffocating. Richard adjusted his tie with forced confidence. "This is being blown out of proportion. Put any luxury dealership under the microscope and you'll find the same thing. That's how the market works." Naomi didn't blink. "Not anymore." She inhaled slowly, then set down a leather-bound folder on the table. This is a comprehensive report documenting discriminatory practices across multiple Caldwell Motors locations. With evidence, the tension exploded into alarm. If this board refuses to take action, she continued, I will make this report public. Richard went pale. Jonathan Fields, voice edged with hesitation, frowned. Naomi, that's a dangerous move. You could damage the company beyond repair. Naomi stood. The damage is already done. The only choice left is whether we contain it or let it consume us. She gathered her papers. You have 48 hours to decide. Reform the policy, or I go public. As she walked toward the door, she glanced back. Richard's jaw was tight, his knuckles white where they gripped the table. She could see it, rage masked behind a smirk. But rage couldn't stop what was coming. That evening, in a dimly lit lounge of a Manhattan restaurant reserved for the powerful and paranoid, Richard Langford swirled bourbon in a crystal glass. Around him sat 4 high-ranking board members, men and women who had long benefited from the status quo. We have a problem, he began, placing the glass down. Naomi Caldwell is trying to dismantle everything we built. If we don't act now, she'll bring this entire brand down under the weight of her so-called reforms. Jonathan Fields leaned forward, unease creasing his forehead. Naomi isn't just an exec, Richard. She owns a major stake in Caldwell. If she takes this public... We have a scandal, Richard interrupted, only if she controls the story, but we don't have to let her. Claire looked cautious. You're suggesting we go after her? I'm suggesting, Richard said, lips curving into a cold smile, that we remind people why Naomi Caldwell is a liability. She's difficult. She's defiant. She's using this scandal to consolidate power. Investors hate uncertainty. So we make her the uncertainty. Jonathan frowned. How? Whisper campaign. Let the media speculate. Suggest she's pushing this to oust board members, build influence, leak it anonymously, let the narrative do the work. Claire's voice was almost a whisper. And if it traces back to us? It won't, Richard said smoothly. Just nudge the right journalist. The dots will connect themselves. Long silence followed. Finally, Jonathan muttered, Let's see where this goes. By the next morning, whispers had become wildfire. A quiet blog post hinted at a corporate power grab. Within hours, a major business outlet picked up the thread, claiming Naomi was using racial allegations to shift company control. Her motives were questioned, her leadership doubted. Investor calls flooded in. Some voiced support. Others demanded clarity, but the board remained silent. And the longer they stayed silent, the more Naomi looked like the aggressor. In her office, Naomi stood with her tablet in hand, reading every headline. They're twisting it, Daniel said, closing the door behind him. They're reframing the narrative before you can. If this becomes about you and not about the issue, it's over. They're painting me as the threat, Naomi said quietly. Not the problem solver, the radical. Daniel nodded grimly. They want people to doubt you. Naomi stared at the screen, her hand clenched. Then it's time to change the game. She picked up her phone, scrolling to a name she had reserved for moments that mattered. She pressed call. Lisa Monroe, answered a voice. The journalist. Relentless. Respected. Feared by companies who had something to hide. Naomi didn't pause. It's Naomi Caldwell. I have a story. You'll want to hear this. Lisa's tone sharpened. I'm listening. Meanwhile, inside Caldwell's boardroom, Jonathan Fields ended a tense call with a major investor and turned to a fellow board member. She's losing ground, he muttered. Investors are nervous. But Naomi's not a quitter, the man replied. She'll escalate. Then we make sure she can't. That afternoon, Naomi received the email she'd been dreading, but expecting. Object. Board decision. Naomi, after careful deliberation, the board has decided not to move forward with the policy reforms. We believe further discussion is necessary before taking formal action. We urge you to consider the long-term consequences of going public. Best. Jonathan Fields. Naomi stared at the screen, her jaw clenched. This wasn't just rejection. It was betrayal. They were going to bury the truth, to protect themselves. She called Daniel. When's the earliest we can hold a press conference? Tomorrow morning. Book it. If the board wouldn't fight for what was right, she would, publicly, fearlessly. The next morning, the conference room at Caldwell Motors HQ buzzed with tension. Reporters arrived early, cameras clicked, microphones adjusted. CNN, MSNBC, Wall Street Journal, all eyes were here. Inside a private room adjacent to the stage, Naomi sat in stillness. She wasn't rehearsing. She had done this speech 1,000 times in her mind. Daniel stood by the door. Lisa's article just went live. It's trending. Naomi nodded. Good. He glanced at her. You ready? Naomi stood, smoothing her blazer. I've been ready my whole life. She stepped onto the stage. The room erupted in camera flashes. Dozens of reporters leaned forward, notebooks poised. Naomi approached the podium. A beat of silence. Good afternoon, she began, her voice resonant with clarity. I wish I could say this was a routine press event, but the truth is far more serious. She paused. Let the weight of the moment settle. For years, Caldwell Motors has been synonymous with luxury, with excellence, with aspiration. But beneath that prestige, something toxic has taken root. Consider the pool, water and ice, cosmonautics. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I recently visited one of our flagship showrooms, not as a CEO, but as a customer. What I experienced was not luxury, it was racial profiling. She gestured behind her. The screen came alive. Naomi, dismissed, ignored. Then Michael greeted, welcomed, champagne offered. No voice spoke over the footage, none was needed. When it ended, Naomi faced the crowd. This isn't about bad customer service, this is about who we choose to see as worthy and who we don't. She paused. And I'm done pretending this is acceptable. Gasps echoed around the room, notepads scratched furiously, and murmurs rippled like aftershocks. Naomi turned back to face them, eyes unwavering. This isn't just an isolated incident. This is a pattern, a culture, and it is unacceptable. Cameras clicked in rapid succession, hands shot into the air, reporters erupted. Caldwell, are you saying Caldwell Motors deliberately discriminates against minorities? Do you believe this is systemic throughout the company? What specific actions will you take next? Naomi raised one hand, and the room quieted like the hush before a storm. This is bigger than Caldwell Motors. This is about the luxury auto industry at large, about the quiet but deliberate barriers placed in front of customers of color, even those with the means to buy. She paused, her voice swelling with resolve. And I will not allow this company to be part of that rot. I've demanded policy reform. I've called for accountability, and I will not rest until it's delivered, including the removal of those who allowed this to happen. She stepped back from the podium. The room detonated with noise. By nightfall, headlines flooded every platform. Naomi Caldwell shakes corporate America, demands end to bias in luxury sales. CNN. CEO exposes systemic racism in Caldwell Motors showroom. 19. The video that changed everything. Forbes. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended. Customers shared their own stories of being dismissed, of being overlooked. Influencers, celebrities, civil rights groups began calling for boycotts. Even loyal patrons questioned their allegiance. Richard Langford watched the press conference on his tablet, hands clenched into fists. Naomi's voice rang out again and again, haunting him through the screen. The fallout was immediate. His phone buzzed. "We need to talk." Jonathan Field's voice was grave. "You're actually considering firing me?" Richard barked. "You're a liability," Jonathan snapped. But Richard sat frozen. The empire he'd built was crumbling beneath him. But in his mind, the war wasn't over. He called in favors. A whisper campaign began that night. Within hours, articles surfaced. Naomi was painted as a power-hungry opportunist. Anonymous op-eds questioned her motives. Bot accounts flooded social media with conspiracies. Was this all orchestrated for control? Was she ever a victim? Naomi read the headlines with stone-cold clarity. She had expected pushback, but this was a smear campaign of industrial proportions. Daniel's voice came through her phone, low and tense. "They're trying to drown the truth in noise, and it's working." But before she could respond, her assistant rushed in. "You need to see this." On the tablet, a headline from Lisa Monroe. "Whistleblower confirms bias at Caldwell. Internal emails leaked." Maria Torres had spoken. Emails, proof, first-hand accounts. Naomi's breath caught. Richard's phone buzzed next. Jonathan's voice was colder than before. "You're finished. The board votes at 6. You know what's coming." For the first time, Richard felt fear. Real, unrelenting fear. The boardroom filled with gravity. 15 power players. Naomi at one end, Richard at the other. The vote would decide everything. Jonathan stood. Does Richard Langford's continued employment serve Caldwell Motors? Before the vote, Richard rose, still trying to hold the room. "We are in the business of prestige," he began. "Our customers expect exclusivity." Naomi turned one mistake into a media circus. He pointed to Naomi. "She has brought this company into crisis. She's made us look weak." But Naomi didn't flinch. She stood. "This isn't about image, it's about integrity. We can rebuild a brand, but only if we rebuild its values." The vote was called, and one by one hands raised. Richard Langford was out. Naomi didn't smile, she simply breathed. The fight wasn't over, but the tide had turned. A ripple of tension coursed through the boardroom. Richard's words had found their mark, tapping into an old, familiar fear among the more traditional board members. The fear of change. The fear of losing the control they'd quietly held for decades. Richard leaned in, voice laced with gravitas. "If you remove me," he said, sweeping his gaze across the table, "you send a message that this company will crumble under pressure, that we will abandon those who built its foundation the moment things get uncomfortable. But if you keep me, we can correct course, we can reinforce strength, we can shape the story, not be buried by it." He paused, then gestured toward Naomi, a sharp flick of the wrist. "But if you side with her, you risk turning this company into something it was never meant to be." He sat back down slowly, face composed, but Naomi could sense the arrogance beneath. He thought he had them. He thought fear would win. She rose. Her voice, when it came, was calm and unwavering. "Let me be clear. This is not about public pressure. This is about principle." She made eye contact with each board member, letting her words land like steady footsteps. Caldwell Motors prides itself on being a leader, but leadership doesn't mean turning a blind eye when injustice stands at our doorstep. It means confronting it, no matter how uncomfortable. She took a breath. "Weeks ago, I brought you evidence. You dismissed it. But the truth doesn't vanish because we ignore it. It grows. And now, the world has seen it." At her signal, Daniel activated the projector. Emails, memos, complaints. Then a letter appeared, an official statement from David Williams, the black entrepreneur turned away in Beverly Hills. His words rang out with force. "I've built my success from the ground up, only to be treated like I didn't belong. Caldwell Motors had a chance to fix this, but instead they shielded those responsible. If change doesn't come, I'll take my business and influence elsewhere." Naomi turned back to the board. "If we allow this to continue, we lose more than money. We lose our soul, and that doesn't come back." She let the silence settle, then delivered the final blow. "So I ask you, is Richard Langford the man you want representing this company?" And Jonathan Fields stood. "We will now proceed to a vote." The doors closed, ballots cast, the verdict swift. Jonathan read aloud, 11 votes for termination, 4 against. Richard's jaw tensed. He didn't move. "As of this moment," Jonathan declared, "you are removed from your position." Security stepped forward. Richard's voice cracked. "You can't do this." Jonathan met his gaze evenly. "It's already done." Richard's eyes darted, searching for support. There was none. He stood, stiffly adjusting his jacket as if pretending dignity could still be salvaged. But eyes had already moved on. Naomi didn't watch him leave. She had more important things ahead. That night, Richard sat alone in his Manhattan penthouse, staring blankly at a looping newsreel. Disgraced executive fired amid bias scandal. His name was everywhere, for all the wrong reasons. Former colleagues ignored his calls. The industry had declared him toxic. He was done. His hands trembled around his whiskey glass. He'd underestimated Naomi. And now, everything he'd built had turned to ash. Meanwhile, Naomi Caldwell stood before a packed audience at headquarters. Cameras rolled. The press leaned forward. "Today," she began, "we turn the page." She acknowledged the pain of the past weeks, the failures, the bias. And then she outlined the future. A new training program, a zero-tolerance policy, an independent oversight team, leadership restructuring. Every change was backed by action. "This isn't just about policy," Naomi said. "This is about a new culture, one that sees, hears, and respects every customer." Applause broke out. Naomi had not only survived the storm, she had rewritten the weather forecast. Later, Maria Torres entered Naomi's office, holding a stack of reports. Her new title read, Training and Compliance Supervisor. 87% compliance so far, Maria said. "Some resistance, but we're getting through." Naomi smiled. "You're doing something that matters." Maria looked out at the city skyline. "I used to think it was safer to stay quiet, but change comes when someone decides to speak up." Naomi nodded. "That someone was you." Across the country, other luxury brands were now under scrutiny. CEOs made statements. Customers demanded accountability. Caldwell Motors had become the new standard, not the cautionary tale. And in Beverly Hills, the once tainted showroom had transformed. New leadership, new energy. Customers noticed. "It actually feels like they want me here," one black man said during a test drive. "Last time, I felt invisible." The numbers reflected it. Sales had rebounded. Trust was slowly rebuilding. Maria walked the hallways with pride, her badge clipped to her blazer, a symbol of what courage could build. One evening, Naomi stood at her window, the New York skyline stretching beyond. She had won, but she knew this wasn't the end. Discrimination didn't die overnight. Power didn't surrender without a fight, but she had shown the world that change was possible. This was just the beginning. Naomi Caldwell's story isn't just corporate, it's human. It's a lesson. Real change begins when someone refuses to stay silent. because the fight for fairness never truly ends.